Courtney, if you would, can you confirm that you can hear me?
I can hear you now.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This evening is our monthly meeting of the Board of Adjustment. We are committed to a transparent process and encouragement of public comment during our meetings. We will be accepting testimony from all parties. If you wish to testify on any particular petition before us this evening using the Zoom platform, please use the raise hand feature. You can raise your hand at any time, and we will recognize you at the appropriate time for the presentation of evidence for each case. If in person, please hand staff your speaker's card. Planner Robin Keefe will be moderating the hybrid meeting and will be asked to provide names of those individuals that wish to speak. I'd like to call the meeting of the City of Wildwood's Board of Adjustment to order. The board members present today are Bob Morris, board member, Arnie Sprunger, board member, Mike Lee, board member, Kevin Lux, board member, and myself, Jared Frank, chair. The Department of Planning staff present is Joe Vunich, Director of Planning, and Robin Keefe, Planner. City Attorney John Young, Director of Public Works Rick Brown, and Court Reporter Courtney Talman are all also present via Zoom. First, I offer into the record the affidavit of publication pertaining to today's meeting, July 18th, 2024, and take official notice of the zoning ordinance of the City of Wildwood, including Chapter 400, Article 2, authorizing establishing the Board of Adjustment's powers and duties. Now let me explain the hearing procedure. Please be aware the information I'm about to describe is also provided on the Board of Adjustment Public Hearing Procedure handout, which was available online prior and up to tonight's meeting. This hearing is informal in its nature. However, the meeting's proceedings will be recorded by a reporter for future transcription if needed. The petitions are called in the order listed on the agenda. As the petition is called, I will ask a Department of Planning staff member to read each request into the record. Thereafter, the Department of Planning will have opening remarks and a brief slide presentation. Then the petitioner or his or her representative will be asked to state their name and address, be sworn in by the court reporter, make a brief presentation to the board explaining the nature of the requested variance, and present such evidence and witness testimony that may evidence the practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship that warrant the variance. The board will only consider the unique character of the property to determine whether they warrant the granting of a variance. Board members may ask questions to clarify the facts of the petitioner's presentation. When the board is satisfied with the material presented by the petitioner, the chair will then ask if there is anyone present or online who would like to speak in favor or opposition to the requested variance. Each speaker will be asked to provide their name and address, be sworn in, and then provide their evidence and oral testimony. Procedurally, the petitioner may request a continuance at any time during the hearing prior to a call for the vote in order to bring in additional evidence or testimony. The board may also continue the proceedings. After the submission of testimony and evidence from all interested parties, the board will ask a staff person to provide the Department of Planning's report on this matter if requested by any member of the board, the petitioner, or any individual that is participating in line or online or in person. Once all witnesses have been heard, the chair will call for a motion to grant or deny with or without conditions. Then the board will vote. At that time, the presentation of evidence relating to the petition is included and no further evidence will be permitted. The board may make a decision today. 4 members of the board must vote in favor of the variance for it to be approved. If a variance is approved, the petitioner has 6 months to obtain the necessary permits or establish the use, or it will expire. If the board's decision is unfavorable, the petitioner has the right of appeal to the St. Louis County Circuit Court. This appeal must be done within 30 days of the decision. Ms. Keefe, are there any questions at this time?
Your chair, I see no questions online. And I see no questions in the audience.
Hearing no questions at this time, meeting will proceed. Department, please read the first request into the record, which will be followed by a brief slide presentation.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the first item is the ongoing hearing that's been held open regarding BA 12-24 Billy Johns 5338 Mirasol Manor Way, Eureka, Missouri 63025. Care of Doug Nance, Lombardo Companies, 4 Research Park Drive, Suite 130, St. Charles, Missouri 63304. Request an exception to the specific yard requirements and exceptions for the purpose of constructing a new single-family dwelling upon the property situated at 3320 Whitsett Fork Road, locator number 26V 510179, Carter's Corner subdivision, Lot 2A, thereby authorizing the placement of it within the defined 100-year floodplain boundary and therefore a minimum setback distance of 0 feet in lieu of 50 feet required from it. The design does indicate a low sill elevation will be 2 feet above the base flood elevation of Carr Creek. This request is contrary to the requirements of Chapter 415.070 FP Floodplain District Regulations and Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban Resident District Regulations of the City of Wildwood Zoning Ordinance. This case has been continued by the Board of Adjustment at both the May 16th, 2024 and June 2024 meetings. Additional testimony will be taken at the July 18th, 2024 meeting. Again, this property is located in Ward 6. And before Ms. Keith begins her slide presentation, the department would like to enter into the record again, Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment, Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this request and all contents contained therein, including the department's report with recommendation. And again, any testimony or evidence that is provided as part of tonight's hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Peters.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Our first case this evening, the subject site is located in the southern portion of Wildwood, just west of Highway 109. It is along Whitsets Fork Road, which is maintained by the Roadway Maintenance Association for the subdivision. Here you can see an aerial of the subject site as well as the surrounding area. Here is Highway 109, and this is where the petitioner is proposing to build. This is Whitsets Fork Road. This is a close-up of the site. The petitioner is requesting to construct a new single-family dwelling and related improvements within the existing effective defined 100-year floodplain. I want to say that again. The petitioner is requesting to build within the effective 100-year floodplain area. And also within the setback from that floodplain area. Also in discussion, in past discussions, we've been talking about this preliminary floodplain, base floodplain boundary. This is to be adopted in the future by the State Emergency Management Association, and it is certainly worthy of your consideration. And it has been a consideration of the city in its review of the request as well. However, I just wanted to stress again that the variance request this evening has to do with the effective line. Since the last meeting, the design of the home has not changed. And no new information has been provided to the department. So we're still looking at the same request. The home as designed is built at a low sill elevation, which is 2 feet above the base floodplain elevation of Carr Creek. According to the city's regulations, in order to build in a floodplain area, the applicant must achieve no rise certification, which indicates that the existing conditions will not change with the new development. It must maintain special setback distances within the floodplain area. It must reach certain low sill provisions, which is what we've been discussing. And there must be authorization from the city's floodplain manager, which is the Director of Public Works. It should be noted that in the past, a portion of this lot has been flood-free, but with the new FEMA flood maps, essentially the entire lot is encumbered by 100-year floodplain. The petitioner's engineer, as noted, has provided a no-rise hydrology report to the city and has conducted additional studies at the request of this board as well. And this report does indicate that there will be no change to the existing conditions regarding the floodplain in this area. And the city has also had an independent reviewer look at this as well. If the variance is not granted tonight, only passive activities may take place on this site. And then this is the hydraulic cross-section provided by the engineer at our last meeting in the event we would like to return to it. This is looking south at the subject site. This is looking across Whitsett's Fork Road to the north. This is looking west along Whitsett's Fork. And this is looking east. This is looking south at the eastern portion of the subject site. Here are some outbuildings that exist currently on the site. This is looking on the western portion of the subject site. This is looking south at that western portion. And this is also looking south at the western portion from a distance back. The department has received, I believe, 18 written comments at this point opposed to the request, and 1 comment in support of it. This concludes my presentation at this time. Our city attorney, our director of public works, and the Department of Planning staff are all available to answer your questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keefe. This time, will any initial questions, comments for the this time, the petitioner, please come forward, state his or her name, address, relation to the property, and be sworn in by the court reporter.
Good evening, Doug Nance, Lombardo Homes developer, builder, and representing Mr. Johns for Research Park, St. Charles, Missouri, 63304.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Nance.
Good evening, board. As I've stated before, my client originally bought this property to build his dream home under the understanding that he could build it and that the 100-year floodplain was where it was. He was unaware of the future, what FEMA was going to do and move those lines. So when we submitted, we got the favorable from city staff for the 50-foot setback based on what we did with FEMA. We did our report that showed no rise, which means we are not affecting anybody or any surrounding residents by building the house in the spot that it's going to be built and putting the fill that's needed to bring that up out of the floodplain. So that's why we were requesting this build within the 50-foot setback, and even just want to make sure that my client is being represented by me, that he did, it really does have a hardship. I mean, he did buy this lot under the understanding he could build on it. And we've been above and beyond of trying to show that there is no rise. And I understand there's going to be some feedback from residents and everything and some concern, but the FEMA report, again, shows no rise, no effect to the neighbors and the surrounding residents. And that's the facts that we have shown. And that's why staff is favorable for this. So if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I also have Chris Keister with TWM here who can answer any of your questions as well. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. Chris Keister, TWM Engineering, 4940 Old Collinsville Road, Swansea, Illinois.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
To echo what Mr. Nance said, I know we've discussed this several times before. As Doug had mentioned, there was a no-rise study that was performed that took into account the more conservative preliminary FEMA mapping, and that showed no rise between present day existing conditions and what is proposed in the plan that has been shown by city staff. As part of that study, we have proved that this site will not have an impact, as Mr. Nance said, on the high water elevations upstream or downstream along the subject waterway. In terms of this variance proposal, at the last meeting, there were some requests made about looking at different options with the home placement. We have briefly looked into those items. However, with the preliminary floodplain extents and the city of Wildwood's 50-foot setback from the edge of those, the edge of the preliminary 100-year floodplain, there is minimal area on the lot to do construction of any kind. At this point, because we've submitted the no-rise condition and we're looking for this variance, what we're looking for is the approval to construct within that within that 50-foot setback. There were some other questions raised as far as site drainage outside of the 100-year event. These would be the more typical daily rainfall events. Those will be addressed, but those will be addressed with a set of construction plans. At this point, we've taken a higher level look at the 100-year floodplain and are trying to address this variance. Without that, there really isn't a path forward. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
I do, Mr. Houston, have a question for you. If I remember from our last meeting, when you did your work to determine where you felt like the floodplain really is, it was different than what the new FEMA floodplain is. And I think you were going to address that with a letter of Lomar.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Could you refresh my memory? Assuming that the Lomar is accepted by FEMA, where is the house? Is the house in the floodplain or isn't it?
It is partially within the floodplain. And so in terms of
What you think is the floodplain?
well, with both. So I guess to address a couple of points in terms of, I think last meeting we were looking at the section across the lot, which was much of our discussion. So in that section, which is one specific section across the lot, that showed the floodplain did not encroach further north. There are other areas on the site where that happens. As was stated in the city's presentation, the home does sit partially within the floodplain itself, and thus the 0-foot setback request. It is not entirely within the floodplain, though. So with the FEMA submittal, it will be a letter of map revision based on fill. And what that is stating a certain portion of this property will be removed from the 100-year floodplain. There will be a meets and bounds exhibit that's submitted to FEMA. The hydraulic analysis, the no-rise certificate that we've prepared to date is not required by FEMA. That's meeting the local ordinances, which are more restrictive than what FEMA lays out in their requirements. However, in order to be able to submit to FEMA, we have to have a local sign off, and thus showing that we meet the local codes. Does that answer your question, or more?
No, I think it does. I mean, the net is, even if the Lomar is accepted by FEMA, the house is still, at least to some degree, still in the floodplain.
That is correct.
Yeah.
With this requirement by the city of Wildwood for the 50-foot floodplain setback, local codes are able to be more restrictive. There are plenty of other municipalities that we've worked in where there is not a setback condition like this. In those cases, a letter of map revision based on fill, which again is just saying that you can place fill in the floodplain, but outside of the floodway of the channel. We're on the edge of the floodplain, so that's what this case would be. There really wouldn't be much of a local review in that sense. They would review the area that is being removed from the floodplain for the intents of floodplain insurance. So really the thing complicating this year, obviously, is the setback. If that setback were not a case, this would be a fairly easy approval by FEMA, in my opinion, because it's shown with this grading on the edge of the floodplain and would not be causing an increase. And if it were just the FEMA submittal, there would not be the no rise study that's being conducted. As Mr. Nance had mentioned, we have completed that, and it's above and beyond FEMA's requirements to meet the city's code.
Yeah, because I think part of what I understood on the no rise is FEMA generally suggests that in the floodway, you can go another foot above what the norm is. And as long as you don't go more than a foot above that in the floodway, it's a no rise situation. But that's not what I'm understanding is going on here.
So
When you say no rise, you mean literally no rise above the flood
correct.
plain where it is now.
Yes, what
No
I'm
extra
saying is,
foot.
well, with what you're speaking about with the floodway and the extra foot, I believe what you're mentioning, the floodway is determined if you took the edges of the floodplain and pushed it in. So when you push that in, you develop what that 1 foot difference is, and where
Right.
those limits are, that's your floodway. So essentially, FEMA has mapped out all of these areas to determine what would be acceptable areas of development. Now, once the flood fringe, the area between the floodway and the floodplain is delineated, there are vertical requirements, which are mentioned. FEMA's requirement is 1 foot above the base floodplain elevation. The city of Wildwood increases that to 2 feet. So that's what's shown within these plans for the lowest opening.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Keister or Mr. Nance? Anything else, Mr. Nance, you'd like to add? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Keister.
Thank you.
At this time, we will open the floor to any speakers in the audience that may want to speak in favor or opposition to this request. Just prior to that, I would like to make a statement on behalf of the board. The testimony in the previous meetings is on the record. We've kept that record open. So the board, that being said, we absolutely welcome public input. Because the record's been kept open, we would strongly suggest that we focus on anything new that's been added. In the interest of everyone's time, I think that would be appreciated by everybody. So absolutely welcome public opinion. The hope is if we can focus on anything that's new or anything that hasn't previously been put into the record. So that being said, we'll proceed.
Mr. Chair, I have a speaker's card from Brett Miller.
Okay. Evening, Mr. Miller.
Brett Miller, 3326 Woodsets Fork, 63038, here in Wildwood, the homeowner next door.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, I have some pictures and a little 1 minute video if I could
Absolutely.
use this. The new information, just to make things relative, is in the last 3 weeks, we've had 2 flooding related issues, 3, excuse me, in the last couple weeks here, just to give a normalized view. My concern, I don't care about anybody building a house or whatever. I'm only concerned about drainage. Woodsets Fork, as you all may or may not know, is one of the 9 watershed areas of Wildwood. It's number 2 in size, 10,000 plus acres. And so as a watershed area, that's been the primary concern from my vantage point. But here's just some pictures if you want to roll through here. That's a picture of my backyard. More relevant. There was a comment about the water doesn't have much movement and everything. You can see right here in the rippling effect of the water. I can kayak in that. So I mean, there's a lot of water movement that's coming across here, pretty regularly. You want to go to the next picture here real quick. I know all the emphasis has been mostly on yeah, go to the water. We've talked a lot about flooding, and that's that's an issue that happens once in a while. It does happen. This is the property in I think 2019, 17 when the last flood was there, and that does happen. But it rains, a couple times a month, and every time it rains in a watershed area, we have a lot of water movement, and as Whitsets, we get flooded pretty much every time. Bob can attest to since 1977 you've been there. So how it's changed and everything, through there, and how the water flow. But this property is the end and the culmination of Carr Creek and Hamilton. So that's the concern there. Go to the next. It's another picture of that's a 4-foot fence that's there. That's kind of giving a relative viewpoint. Like I said, our concern or my concern is water. That's 2 days ago. What happens there in the movement of water through this property? I just asked this question over and over again. How are we going to handle this? And I can't seem to get any answer on that. Next one. But this back trough, as you can see on the right-hand side of the photo, that's our bridge. That was just 2 days ago. So, I mean, this is right there at the corner of where we're talking about property wise. Go to the 34, 390, or the same one. This is kind of where they're proposing to put this 11 to 14 foot elevation here against close to our property line. It's relatively represented. We now have a tree right in the middle of the trough that tries to drain 3 lots up above from here, and the angle of I'm just concerned about the slope of a 11 14 foot heading the opposite direction with all the gutter runoff, all the off of the size of the wall. How are we going to move that water in an appropriate basis off the lots? If not, if you look past my house to the next white one, it's going to go through the engineering that I did through Wildwood building my house. The whole engineering study and the way we built this trough and everything to move water through, that used to be an elevation, actually. That was a fence line there. We actually had to dig it down and to move the water. It's working really well, but it only works well currently. That water, if it's pushed back at all, is going to go right into the basement of Mr. Carter here at 3330, I think it is. What's that for? So that's our primary concern here, is that it is a watershed area. Suggestion would be that the watershed water erosion task force at Wildwood take a look at this. This is an area they're interested in. This is the end point of it. I mean, it's a pretty critical area, just to make sure that we're not going to do something that's going to harm and do future damage to the drainage of this entire valley here. This is the end of a 10,000 acre drainage. So that's our concern. If it goes to the front with the cauldrons and everything, it's going to wind up in the corner. Now, So again, it's kind of just a video shot of how things, drain currently off the road and down around. It's gonna give you a different view of you can kind of stop it right here. Yeah, up, back up. We're stepping on my computer, sorry. That was a representative view there. That little barn is about 11, 12 feet high, maybe. So it kind of gives you an idea of elevation of what we're talking about putting across this drainage here. I don't know if you can stop it. Like, right, one more, do a couple frames forward. There. So, yeah, we're talking about, basically a wall across there. And that's my concern. So suggestions would be to have the task force, do some evaluation on water movement here, because we've had such flooding just in the last 3 weeks. And then also the possibility again of removing the basement as we did, and then we're talking about a 3-foot elevation, which is much more manageable, from water movement in that regard. But right now there's considerable flooding on a regular basis just from rain, much more so than ever happens from the Merrimack. I understand your all's issue is, with that backflow from the Merrimack River and the creeks, but we have an effect of this on a very regular basis coming from watershed. Those are my comments. Still my question.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Keister, if you'd like to.
This comment has been heard. There are multiple culverts through the driveway that handle that drainage way. So while it's true that we have been looking at the floodplain in totality, which exceeds the drainage ditch that was shown in the video, through the driveway, there will be, I believe it's 3 36-inch culverts, and that will handle what I'm going to refer to here as site drainage. That would be more your everyday flows versus what's happening within the floodplain. Once we get past this floodplain variance process, we understand that there will be a site plan and improvement plan review by the city of Wildwood that will handle any specific site grading issues such as this. So as of now, the culverts have been shown to handle that waterway, and then there will be, I'm sure, additional reviews and comments coming from the city at that point. But this comment has been heard, and we feel it has been addressed to allow that water to move in such a way. The home will be within the vicinity of that channel, but we are providing a pathway. It's not being blocked or walled off where it will back up onto adjacent properties.
Can you pull that back up, Brian? I understand where the driveway culverts, from this image, if this is, correct, this would tell me that it's the driveway is as well. This is well behind where the driveway would be. This is right where the house would be. Is that correct?
Correct. There will have
So-
to be some grading that's done to redirect this channel to the right in this picture.
So if you don't mind, if you have a laser pointer, show me, you said this water be redirected. Where would this water go? Where would you foresee this water going? Right now, it looks like it's going a nice level.
Yes. So in the proposed case, it would have to jog slightly, and then right about here would be where your driveway culverts are.
Is that not uphill? That looks uphill a little bit.
There will be some grading that has to be done.
Okay.
But as part of our submittal to the city, these driveway culverts were looked at to verify that on their own, just looking at the culverts themselves, they also would not be causing a backup of water onto the adjacent property.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Miller has spoke at, I believe it, two or all of the hearings that we've had on this particular matter. And as a result of those comments, we did add a condition to the department's recommendation, and that was that all drainage has to be positive, meaning that we cannot have the existing network of drainage blocked so as to create a problem with ponding on properties upstream or downstream. So there is a condition in the report that says positive drainage is expected across the site.
Mr. Houston, are you saying that the culverts that are in the current plan have sufficient volume to take the quantity of water that would be flowing
Yes.
from upstream down? So how do you determine that?
So in Missouri, it's called backwater, but essentially we're looking at a certain point away from the face of the culvert. If your culvert, in this case, if we build the driveway over this channel and we have a 6-inch culvert, that will create backwater at the property that will increase the water levels that are shown in this video. So our analysis then looks at what is the opening size for a pipe, a series of pipes, a box culvert that allows the water to pass through at an elevation equal to what's shown in the present day. As of right now, I believe that's 3 36-inch culverts is what we have analyzed. But what's it?
3 36-inch pipes.
I believe that's right.
So I think you recognize that sounds like a lot of water.
Correct.
30.
Yes. Because yes, even before these meetings started, we were aware that there is a channel flowing through this property, whether it's the state of Missouri, city of Wildwood, or just common drainage law. That is a requirement that you're not hindering an upstream site when you are at the bottom of the drainage way. And so that is where the sizing of those driveway culverts has come into play.
Question on the culverts. Those, after they are installed, would be maintained and the obligation of the property owner or the city to make sure that flow is not obstructed and any debris that gets caught up is not timely removed.
In my opinion, that would be the responsibility of the property owner.
Mr. Lux, that will be the responsibility of the property owner.
Thank you.
But one other thing I would also like to point out is with regards to this floodplain variance and what we're here for tonight, I also would view this as a site design requirement and something that we will be showing in our plans as we get into the improvement plan review by the city of Wildwood. But this is somewhat outside of the floodplain variance application that we are reviewing tonight. So we have heard all of the different site design considerations that have been brought up, but we also are somewhat bound. We're trying to show that we are meeting the floodplain setback variance and work through that process before we progress further into dealing with some of these more localized site concerns.
Yeah, I think one of the real challenges here is, I know you've engineered this to not create a problem with the water flow. There are just practical issues that pop up here. We have a neighbor who has 3 36-inch culverts for kind of a ravine or whatever. Works great until brush gets into it and it just plugs up and takes them days to clean it out, and water's flowing everywhere. So, yeah, I mean, I think we have to, I know there's nothing you can do about that, but it is something that I think about is, you know, are we creating a situation that should work, but as soon as you get a tree or whatever that gets hung up in there, now you've got a problem again, so.
And I agree, that is absolutely a valid concern. Again, my standpoint on that would be that we certainly can look at other options, if it were a box culvert that instead of having three 36-inch round openings, potentially it's a box culvert that is, right, my on-the-spot math, but coming up with an equal opening area that would be wider where you're not dealing with those obstructions. But again, that type of design is really kind of separate than the floodplain variance that we're looking for tonight. And I'm sure, just based on some of the other conditions that have been, in my opinion, correctly added by the city, that will also be a focus of any further review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Miller, did you want to come up and add anything to that?
No, okay. So it goes back to, where does all this water go? Right now, it's kind of splitting, and then now we're gonna direct it to the front with 3 90-degree turns. And that's my question, I'm asking. This area right here is the corner where all the water is going to go to. She gets this image up here. Sorry, I would have, there's one in there with just the rain, but he pulls this one up. This corner right here, this has been my central question I've asked over and over again. That's where those culverts are going to drain it into. So how are you going to get the water out of there? There's 2 choices. One either builds there and it goes into Tracy's house, which is only about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, of rise. Or how do you get it to go back to the creek when the creek's already full because of the flash flooding, which happens every time? That's what we had 3 of those in the last 3 weeks. So all that water is supposed to come around the culverts, or the 3 36-inch tubes. That's great, but it puts it in this corner, and then it backs up there, which pushes everything back, through the whole process. Until somebody can answer that question of where the drainage goes, and in a rain situation, it has nowhere to go other than Tracy's house, or it backs up into John Carter's house. So it's a very real issue that's going to affect people, and nobody's answered this question. If you put a culvert in there and try and drain into the creek, you can't. The creek's full. That's just a fact. That's why our bridge is flooded. So that's my question, and I keep trying to get an answer.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Again, for Mr. Miller's sake, we have answered the question. We are expecting positive drainage. We're not going to put water into someone's house, nor are we going to create a backwater situation. We're going to mimic the existing flow. If that's through 3 36-inch culverts, or splitting it and sending some to the front and some to the back. There'll be an engineering analysis to determine that.
So just to clarify that statement, so if in the event that the study is completed and they cannot find a way to create the positive flow in the direction that you're saying, then even if we do approve today, it would then not proceed moving forward if that condition is not met through either our conditional variance or the next step of the process, correct?
That's
So there's still
correct.
multiple checks that would be in place that could prevent this from moving forward if those conditions are not met, correct?
If the board were to act favorably on this request and adopt the conditions as set forth, if positive drainage cannot be achieved, and obviously not create a problem for the downstream property or any of the upstream properties, then yes, we couldn't, the variance would be null and void, and we'd be back to square one.
So just to be clear, Mr. Miller's, and I think some of the other neighbors' concerns is where can that water go if everything's full? And what I'm hearing the department say is if there's no way to discharge that water, then they can't build on it.
Well, again, I assume that regardless if there's construction on the lot or not, if the creek's full, that water goes somewhere now. And so what we're going to try to do is mimic that so as it does not create a problem for the home downstream or any of the homes upstream. And Mr. Brown, our Director of Public Works, who is also our floodplain administrator for the city of Wildwood's, come on screen. So I assume he will have something to either add or correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I was just going to say, if it's okay, this is part of our normal staff review of projects, the drainage review. So we would be evaluating the proposal more specifically relative to providing positive drainage and ensuring there's no problems created, nuisances created relative to the adjacent property owners that are upstream or downstream. But by and large, that water has to make its way to the creek as it does now. That will still happen once the home is constructed and the site is graded. It's going to flow to the creek, and as that creek rises, it will affect any of the tributaries anywhere. They will also essentially rise. That's not a function of the house. That's a function of hydraulics, and that occurs anywhere in the watershed. Those side tributaries are going to be impacted by the flow of the creek in the main channel, but that has nothing to do effectively with the grading or the house. It's a different issue, I guess, is my thought on that.
To that point, Director Brown, understood that, you know, we're not adding water, you know, there's not more water showing up. But until you talk about flat surfaces, driveways, roof lines, gutters, and that are going to be maybe move that water faster, more current, if you will. Is that any concern? That we understood that in theory you're diverting the water and it's mimicking, as Director Vina is mimicking the same ending result as it is now, with the exception that you are adding a lot of flat surfaces. Is that a concern from a standpoint of a flow or?
Well, so we have started more recently as part of our review of these projects, mitigating any additional discharge that may be created by the impervious surfaces that are constructed. So that'll be part of the hydrology and hydraulic review that we do, is to be sure that we can capture that water and then essentially hold it back and release it at a slower rate at a longer duration, so it doesn't impact or increase the amount of, or the volume of water that's leaving the site. So that'll be part of our review when if it's approved to move this project forward.
Mr. Chair, regardless of the circumstance, whether it's this lot or any lot, as Mr. Brown mentioned, we're requiring dry wells, amended soils, bioretention. This has all come out of the efforts of our watershed erosion task force that recognizes that any impervious surface, if we can contain the water on the site for a longer period of time, we've achieved a goal of lessening the stress on the creeks and the tributaries.
Any other questions as things stand now? Other speaker cards, Ms. Keefe?
Eric Teagarden.
Eric Teagarden, 3340 Whitsets Fork. I'm a neighbor to the east of the property. West of the property. Directions mixed up.
Mr. Teagarden, will you sworn in?
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So I'm opposed to granting this variance. And I think I mentioned it before, but you know, the city has asserted that the property cannot be used for anything other than passive activities if the variance is not granted. I have not seen anything to indicate that the north end of the property is not buildable. I realize it's a smaller area than potentially the current proposed house, but and it's on the hill, but my understanding is there's still room within the setbacks to build there. So I disagree with the city's assertion that the property is unusable without this variance as a residential property, first off. Secondly, so I've got a background in aerospace engineering, which I recognize is not the same thing as civil engineering. But I just want to point out, so, analysis is often performed with modeling, like so the hydraulic models that the engineers put forth in the case of the additional section cut they added for the house. In my experience, engineering models should be erring on the side of being conservative because models are inherently imperfect. And so I don't have a background in hydrology or civil engineering, so I can't say for certain if it's the case here, but a surface level glance shows that the section cut that was selected appears to be the least conservative location possible with respect to impact of flooding. I don't know if it'd be possible to pull up, probably in the original presentation, I think there's an overhead view that shows the section cuts. And again, I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm not speaking from any place of authority here, but I think that's the one, yeah. But so if you look at the location of the section cut, and the bottom of the graphics unfortunately cut off a little bit for where the map is, but that section cut, the property line dips pretty far to the south right there, and that's because it's following the creek. And so the section cut that he took there accounts for that. The hill is further back, the creek is further south. And so there's inherently a lot more area there, and the water is moved further away from the structure as a result. If you were to take the section cut just a few feet to, I mean, more than a few tens of feet to the west in this graphic, the creek comes significantly further north, and the elevation on the property is slightly higher in that area, but you're still kind of getting the giant jetty sticking out from the north end of the property there. Again, I don't know if that's enough to make a significant difference on the hydraulic calculations, but it does seem like to me that the most conservative approach for the for where the section cut is taken is was not done here. So I suspect that if it were modeled like that, it would show a worse result. I don't know if it would be enough to change the no rise certification, but I'm a little skeptical of that. And additionally, depending on the situation, if there's new data, whether it's from test results or real life examples, should be taken into account when compared with models. And in my experience, when test data and models disagree, it's rarely reality that is incorrect. I would personally lend skepticism to a model that does not match up with what we see in real life. I know there's been testimony from the neighbors multiple times. We've seen some pictures. There's a lot of flooding that happens on this property. I can't say for certain because I can't draw the 100-year flood lines over some of the pictures that were shown, but it seems to me that we are seeing flood events more frequently than 100 years that are coming up to those lines. And the section cut that was shown shows that the 100-year flood was way back at the bottom of the creek, and we're seeing water way past that. And so the engineer is aware of this. Obviously, he's been at these meetings, and in my case, in my role doing aerospace engineering, if I get data that shows that my model is incorrect, I'm inclined to go and view my model with skepticism and see if I need to change my model because something is not matching up here. So, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't think he's reached out to the neighbors and said, "Hey, can I get more evidence here to see if I can substantiate my model or make changes?" And I understand there may be the way the hydraulic modeling done may be, set by FEMA guidelines or whatever else like that. And maybe that's not an option. I don't know, but it seems to me that something that should have been done that isn't or has not been. And then I think that's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Teagarden.
Thank
Any
you.
questions from Mr. Teagarden?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Absolutely, Director.
just to assure Mr. T. Meyer as well as the board, the city is taking the most conservative approach because, again, the mapped floodplain line on the current FEMA information shows that there is a large area of this site that is not in the floodplain. The conservative approach is we're using the proposed map to guarantee that we are taking a conservative approach. And again, for the portion of the property north of Witsit Fork Road, the department did say in testimony at the last meeting that there is a buildable area. But as part of tonight's report, I do mention that that slope exceeds 30%. And under the city's natural resource protection standards, if this were a lot that was subject to them, we would not allow that to be developed based upon 5 characteristics relating to soil and slope. So we have investigated that, and we have told the board that there is a buildable area because this lot predates the application, excuse me. This lot was part of a subdivision that was not subject to the application of the natural resource protection standard. So again, we've investigated it. We've given you rationale why we think it's not a suitable location, but certainly that those resource protection standards do not apply on that portion of the property. Thank you.
Mr. Springer?
So if the petitioner wanted to build on the north side of Wissets Fork, they would have to get a variance to do that? Or would the city just say, no, isn't going to happen?
Again, the resource protection standards are applied to new subdivisions that are 5 lots or more. Carter's Corner was only a division, I believe, that involved 3 lots, so they're not applied. But when we review plans for development, we look at the soil and slope characteristics as if the resource protection standards did apply. And in this case, they would also impact the floodplain area. Those are 100% protected. That's why the board is reviewing this. So again, we apply them, but they're not applicable because the subdivision wasn't large enough to trigger the application. But I just want to emphasize, we're not just disregarding the comments we're hearing from the public, we're investigating them. And certainly, I believe if the home was to be proposed on the north side, Witsit Fork Drive on the portion of the lot that is available, there probably would either have to be a variance from the Board of Adjustment or certainly from our Department of Public Works to the grading code.
So it might be possible, but it's problematic and would certainly requires a variance of some nature.
It's just problematic when you're building on 30% slopes. I know the last speaker has his home on that side, but again, our code, at least the resource protection in terms of slope and soil, was done by the chair of the department at the University of Missouri's Columbia. He investigated it. We had it verified by other soil scientists, geomorphologists, engineers, etc. It's just not a good practice to build on slopes that are steep because in this particular instance, soils are usually shallow, it's rocky. And so from that perspective, you're dealing with some stability issues, extended foundations, etc.
It's just going to create other problems. Yeah.
Maybe not from a code perspective, but a livability perspective. How's
Right.
that?
Okay. Thank you.
Just as the floodplain does.
Ms. Keith?
Mr. Chair, I have a speaker's card from Jessica Igler.
Hi, my name's Jessica Igler. I am also at 3340 Witsit Fork Road.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yeah.
In response to the potential need to build for a variance to build on the north side of the road, I would support that in lieu of building into the floodplain. I have continuing concerns with both the floodplain, with the no rise certification, as I don't, to my knowledge, think that it takes into account the flash flooding which I feel to be much more dangerous to both property and frankly to people's lives along Carr Creek. My concern is in part a potential choke point between the mound and the rock wall that forms the south side of Carr Creek. I am concerned that that is going to cause the water to back up in a very fast moving flash flood situation, and that it will also cause the water to shoot out between that choke point, potentially at the Vogels house, or to do additional erosion damage along the creek there. And my concerns on this are based, previously I asked the engineer and was told that he was not taking into account historic rainfall totals in the engineering. And my understanding is that a no-rise certification is basically addressing a slow-moving flood from the Merrimack, not the fast-moving flash floods that we are much more prone to in the valley. I would also support talking to my neighbors about the potential of moving Witzett's Fork south and bowing it, give them additional room out of the floodplain to build a house. But that would have to be worked out between everyone else and not me. So I'd really like to see something to address the flash.
Any questions, Ms. Ziegler? Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do believe I have a couple speakers online. Let me go ahead and promote Mark and Linda Bromeyer.
Is there Mr. Bromeyer?
This is Linda Bromeyer. Can you hear me now?
We can. If you
Okay,
could,
yes.
please state your name, address, relationship to this property, and then we'll get you sworn in.
My name is Linda Bromeyer, and I live at 3348 Witzett's Fork Road, which is 4 houses west of the subject property.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Yep.
Okay. I would just like to say that I'm opposed to this variance. I have serious concerns about the floodwater displacement and diversion due to 12,000 cubic yards of fill that is proposed for this site. This number, 12,000 cubic yards, is taken directly from documents related to Mr. John's proposal, which I obtained from Wildwood under the Sunshine Law, and is the size of a football field, 14 feet high in the center with sloping sides. It's common knowledge and common sense that placing a large obstacle, such as acres of dirt, in a floodplain directly in the path of moving water will displace and redirect stormwater into lower lying areas such as the neighbors' yards. Someone on the Wildwood stated that they will make sure that the water flow will mimic the present flow. Mimic means to copy nearly exactly. I'm not sure how it can mimic that when there's this giant pile of dirt. The water's going to have to make 90-degree turns left or right. I agree with Mr. Miller on that. It's not going to flow the same way. And it's very likely to back up because this is not a small obstacle. It is a very large obstacle. I would also like to take issue with Mr. Keister's statement from the May 9 meeting on page 9 of the minutes, where Mr. Keister reiterated the edge of the floodplain had minimal velocity. My husband and I witnessed fast-moving water moving west to east across our property during numerous flash floods on Carr Creek in the past 24 years that we have lived here, including 2 flash floods just in the last 2 weeks. We have planted several small trees at the back of our property, 25 to 40 feet from the creek, with posts hammered into the ground and wire fence cages to protect them from deer. Several times during flash flooding, the water was running so fast and with so much force or velocity that those posts and cages were ripped out of the ground. Our experience in the eyewitness testimony of the neighbors who actually live in this valley contradicts Mr. Keister's statement. I would say that I agree with Eric Teagarden that when a paper and pencil model does not match conditions on the ground, The actual conditions should have much greater weight given to their consideration. I would also like to call attention to page 10 of the minutes of the May meeting of the Wildwood meeting in regard to the no-rise report. The minutes say, Mr. Keister noted storm events had not been incorporated into the model, only CEMA's data. It seems to me that not including the storm events with all this flash flooding that we experienced makes his no-rise report incomplete and misleading. It gives the impression that all is well when in fact it is not all well. We've presented a lot of eyewitness testimony, our neighbors and ourselves, photos and video as proof that storm events do affect the rise of water on the subject property as well as our neighboring properties. And our testimony may not be a report signed by an engineer, but in a court of law, eyewitness testimony, photos, and videos are generally accepted as evidence. And I have two questions. Has Mr. Keister done a hydrology study incorporating storm events and the 12,000 cubic yards of fill dirt into his model with the storm events? And if so, what data did he use? The worst flash flooding from a storm event occurred in our area on August 26, 2019, when 5 inches of rain fell on a few hours in Eureka and Wildwood. And I request from Mr. Chair, I request your permission to have Ms. Keefe pull up a photo on the screen of my house during that flood.
Absolutely. Ms. Keefe, do you have that photo?
Okay, so this storm caused the floodwater levels to rise frighteningly close to our back door. We were literally in the basement holding our breath, wondering if we were going to have our whole house ruined by this flood. And if it happened once, there's a risk that it could happen again. And in the event of another storm event like August 26, I would like to know from the board or someone else, an engineer or someone, how much additional rise in water levels will that giant mound of dirt cause on the properties that are upstream from it? And we're talking about the Bogle upstream and downstream, the Bogelin, Miller, Carter, Egler, Bromeyer properties, as well as equine therapy out on 109. I have a few more comments and then I'll be finished. My second question is for the Wildwood Board of Adjustment. If and when the no-rise certification is subject to FEMA, will the evidence presented by the neighbors, including our comments, photos, and videos of flooding at 3320 Witsit Fork Road and our properties during storm events, be included as part of the community acknowledgement? And if you act like the community has acknowledged there's no problem, it seems to me that would be fraudulent. And can you say in the community acknowledgement that the community does not acknowledge that this is okay, that we say it is not okay and that we're opposed to it? Also, I would like to suggest a possible solution to some of the problems on this proposal. It's my understanding that a previous owner of the land, Greg Shepard, had a proposal to build a house on his site with a detention basin to hold floodwaters displaced by fill dirt on the site. I asked that the civil engineer or someone in Wildwood carefully examine Mr. John's proposal to see if a dry detention basin, an elongated ditch, because there's a lot of land there along the back of the property, or some subterranean structure could be used to provide capacity at 110% of the displacement of floodwaters due to dirt fill. I am not suggesting scraping an inch or two of dirt off the property, which has already been studied and rejected, but creating a dry pond to hold flash water wood until it could drain out. Flash floods in Carr Creek rise quickly, but they also fall quickly when the rain ends. The flash flooding on July 16 half filled the that was just 2 days or yesterday or 2 days ago, half filled the Radcliffe subdivision's very large detention basin around 1:30 p.m., but the basin was empty by 3:30 p.m. I was driving by Highway 109 both times past that basin and took special notice of it. I asked if the civil engineer or geotechnical engineer has determined if the dirt removed from a dry detention basin on the property would be suitable for use as fill material. And right now there's a huge pile of fill material proposed. I suggest minimizing the amount of fill dirt brought onto the site so that less capacity is needed in a detention basement, because somebody's going to say, well, we can't dig a ditch that big. Well, not if you have to accommodate for 12,000 cubic yards. That is a lot of dirt. But maybe you could accomplish that by 3 different adjustments. Shorten the driveway so you don't have so much dirt to build up a driveway, build on a slab with no basement, and possibly reducing the footprint of the house. If the owner doesn't want to mow the detention basin, maybe he could plant some cattails and wildflowers in the detention basin and consider it a natural feature. The website for the Metropolitan Sewer District of St. Louis states that its service area is all of St. Louis City and 90% of St. Louis County, with Highway 109 as general western boundary and the three major rivers, Missouri, Mississippi, and Merrimack, as boundaries. This means a detention basin on this property and its drainage would not be under the regulations of the Metropolitan Sewer District as I understand it. The floodwater that is stored in the detention basins at the nearby Radcliffe subdivision drains into Hamilton Creek after the storms, as far as I can tell, usually within a few hours. I'm not sure what other regulations there exist from watershed agencies, but the water from the subject property would be the same exact water that's going into Carr Creek anyway. It's not water with industrial contaminants or human sewage, so it shouldn't pose any more risk to the creek than other flood water. So you're talking about making sure there's positive water flow. If you could store some of that excess water in a basin and release it later, that would probably help a whole lot and help keep some of that water from backing up into all of our basements. I'm opposed to Wildwood granting the variance unless there's conditions to resolve the problems of water displacement due to the fill dirt and water diversion due to the placement of the fill dirt mound directly in the path of the water coming down the watershed. It is not a hardship to ask a property owner to adjust his house plans or placement to fit the unique characteristics of the building site. Wildwood does this all the time with other developers and property owners. They asked Mr. Miller to adjust his house plan. This lot, I believe, is buildable under certain conditions, and Wildwood makes absolutely certain that they're not going to cause damage or harm to the rest of us. In the past, Wildwood has protected the people of this valley from flood damage to our homes by adhering to their own ordinances and with careful restrictions or conditions placed on people who ask for variances in a floodplain. We expect no less from Wildwood in this case. Please remember that your ordinances in Wildwood exist to protect all the people in the neighborhood. And I thank you for your time and your consideration and all the thought you're giving to this. That's all. But my husband, Mark, would also like to speak.
Please go ahead, Mr. Bromeyer. First, we'll get you sworn in. I apologize.
Thank you.
You could please state your name, address, relationship to the property, and we'll get you sworn in, Mr. Bromeyer.
Okay, my name's Mark Bromeyer. I live at 3348 Whitsett Fork Road, about 4 properties west of the subject property.
You're muted, Courtney.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Mr. Bromeyer.
My wife and I have lived at this location for 24 years. I'm a registered architect in Missouri and 9 other states. I've worked in this profession for 44 years, and my experience includes residential homes, site planning, and site development. From the June 20 meeting minutes in the determination of issues and finding of facts, item number 7 under lot and area conditions characteristics, it states that, quote, intermittent flooding from peak storm events may also cause limited inundations of the site, unquote. Has the board had their eyes closed when the photos submitted that showed the site 90% underwater on August 26, 2019? That same day, the water came to within 45 feet of my back door. The minutes from the June 20 should state that the peak storm events have caused limited inundations into the site. These are the waters that are we're greatly concerned about coming onto our property. It's not a hardship if Mr. Johns cannot build his dream house on the property. The floor plans for the proposed house are not available from the city, but it appears that Mr. Johns and his builder, Lombardo Homes, did not take the time to design a house around the given site parameters. It appears that the plan was selected and now he is trying to get a variance approved to make the awkward combination work. The proposed design is not requiring variances due to hardships on Mr. Johns, but is of great concern to several of his upstream neighbors that a future hardship is in store for them. The house footprint appears to be better suited for a site that is not in a floodplain and where the site design doesn't restrict flash flooding channels of Carr Creek. The June meeting ended with a continuance to the July meeting to obtain additional information related to water flow with this variance request and the effect of the flash flooding from the storm events upon the neighboring properties. To my knowledge, Mr. Johns has submitted nothing additional this month. That being the case, Mr. Chair, I would request your permission to have Ms. Keith pull up my Exhibit A site plan on the screen.
Ms. Keefe, do you have that handy? Okay, Mr. Bromeyer, we have it pulled up.
Okay, I would like to present a finding and a solution with an option for consideration. First, I want to draw your attention to the area hatched in red, pretty much in the middle of the site plan there. During the June meeting, the civil engineer, Mr. Koester, indicated that the septic drain field would be located in this area and would be outside the preliminary base flood area. With 50-foot floodplain setback and a 30-foot side yard setback, all that remains is approximately 900 square feet for a septic system. I would expect that the proposed 9,100 square foot house would require a drain area.
Just a minute, Mr. Bromeyer, we're gonna get back to your.
Yeah, we lost the site plan.
Image. We'll get it pulled up. If you want to go ahead and continue with the, yeah, you were referring to the
Yeah,
septic.
I would expect that the proposed 9,100 square foot house would require a drain area for the septic field at least 6 times that size when compared to the drain field of my 1,460 square foot house at 3340 at Witsetts Fork Road and the more recently built 3,400 square feet on 2-story house at 3326 Witsetts Fork Road. This issue alone appears to render the site unbuildable. Next, I would like to present my version of the solution for the site's development. My exhibit shows the currently proposed 9,100 square foot footprint moved approximately 85 feet closer to the road with its front at the 50-foot building setback to reduce the fill dirt mound height by 9 feet. It is also noted that the first floor would be slab on grade construction in lieu of having a basement. The flat area for the patio, pool, basketball, whatever it's going to be, was moved to the east side of the house and is accessed via steps down from a smaller deck on the south. I can't move.
Where we're showing to the east of the house.
Did we lose you there, Mr. Bromeyer?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
In order for Mr. Johns to end up with the same floor area, basement plus first floor, he would need to build a 2-story house. This was done by his neighbor next door at 3326 Witsetts Fork in 2023 as required by the city of Wildwood, even though the building was not in the current floodplain. It's a beautiful house. It is possible that the 2-story design could result in a reduced footprint. It would also eliminate the concern about a short, steep driveway. This solution demonstrates how the house can simply be moved out of the existing path of the primary flash flood and reduce the amount of fill dirt required while still providing nearly all the desired amenities. I've made an attempt to demonstrate how the regrading of the site would work. With the flash flood channel is noted with the blue arrows, which indicate how the new design allows the flash flood channel to continue through the site as it currently does, instead of being obstructed by the football-sized mound of dirt. On the southern part of the site, I've indicated an area for a possible dry detention basin or underground structure sized for 110% of fill displacement. It would gradually release the water into Carr Creek as the floodwaters subside. The city added a condition requiring that the applicant requiring the applicant to address the standing water in the northwest corner of Witsits Fork Road, at Witsits Fork Road. But the much more troublesome concern to the neighbors upstream is caused by the huge amount of dirt that a huge mound of dirt in the flash flood channel. I really hope that the board prioritizes the current residents' concerns over the desires of Mr. Johns. The summary statement added by the Department of Planning for the July 18th, 2024 meeting in a determination of issues and finding of facts indicates that regulations would prohibit development on the hill on the north side of the road. Although Mr. Vunich has somewhat addressed that. And we do have other houses, including one that was built about 15 years ago at 3356 Witsits Fork Road, which was built on the same hill, and I believe it has the same slope, approximately the same slope. It was also mentioned about obstructions clogging the culvert pipes, and the concern about things floating in branches and such. Our rain event this past week, we ended up with a half a dozen logs floating out from the creek woods out into the middle of our yard. So that is also a concern. The summary statement also discusses the potential changes, which, as I understand it, would require updated design documents and a reapplication for any variances based upon the new design. I think that a reapplication which adopts the suggested modifications would be a fair compromise. I thank the Board of Adjustment for their months of consideration regarding the difficult situation. Please remember the real fears and concerns that the current neighboring Wildwood citizens have, both upstream and downstream, with regard to the increasingly common flash flooding of the Carr Creek Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bromeyer. Ms. Keefe, you said was there another online speaker?
Mr. Chair, I do not see any more hands raised.
Okay. Any other members of the audience wish to speak cards?
I have no additional speaker cards on this item.
Mr. Keister, you absolutely. If you'd like to, you're more than welcome to.
Just wanted to touch on a few discussion points that have come up. With regards to a septic system or a detention pond, similar to what I had mentioned earlier, we would view those as site concerns. Those can certainly be looked at once we get past this floodplain variance issue and we get into formal improvement plans on the site. There was a comment about whether or not this was in MSD's coverage area. I believe the speaker had mentioned that it was outside MSD's coverage area. We did confirm that with MSD several months ago. I can provide that documentation if need be. There was a comment regarding a hydrologic study and whether or not it was performed. It is correct. We have not done our own hydrologic values or calculations to determine discharge values in Carr Creek. We are using the values that the State Emergency Management Agency has used. As was noted at the beginning of this meeting, the preliminary floodplain map covers more of the existing lot than the effective floodplain map. I personally cannot speak to what values were used in the effective model. I don't have a copy of the effective model, but that indicates that there was some increase in peak discharge values that were used as SEMA developed this preliminary model. And that's the model that all of our no-rise calculations are based upon. There was a comment about the amount of fill that was used or that will be used on the site. I believe the number that was mentioned was 12,000 cubic yards. That is the total volume of fill for the whole development. In terms of what fill will be placed between the top of the base floodplain and the existing grade. This morning I had run through and calculated that. I believe that comes out to about 500 cubic yards. So the 12,000 is not incorrect, but it's referring to the total amount of fill for the site as opposed to the fill that's being placed in the floodplain. There was a comment about historic rainfall totals and essentially calibrating the model. Similar to what I mentioned earlier with the hydrologic values, SEMA has set those and they have shown an increase over the effective map that was developed several years ago. And the last comment I wanted to address was with regards to the hydraulic section placement, which is shown in the projected image right now. Section 1971.2 and section 1222.9 are sections that are directly pulled from the State Emergency Management Agency model. If we were to have rerun those calculations directly as SEMA had modeled, there would be no section through the site. So section 1597 was added to account for the site's fill. In terms of its placement and whether or not that was a conservative design or not, it was placed where it is so that it captures the full amount of the grading of the site. Would you mind if I borrow? If the section were moved on either side of that 1597, we aren't capturing the full extent of the site grading. So the plan is to draw that section perpendicular to the flow line of Carr Creek, which sits further south on the screen. And then thus this section captures the grading for the driveway and the buildup for the building pad and the recreational area to the south of the main residence. If there are any other questions from the board, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah, just, I hope this isn't a real obvious thing, but the bigger the flood, the more the water goes that way, right?
Correct.
Right, okay. So, if you put the house over here, you're away from the flood.
On the north side of Woodsidge Ford?
Yeah.
Correct.
However, you're on a steep hill. That's got its problems. So I think what I'm hearing people ask the question of, and I know it's not necessarily our issue here, but the further this property goes that direction, the less you have mounds of dirt here that could potentially cause a problem for the folks upstream. And I know that we have to model these things and you have to rely on something, but it's really amazing how Mother Nature sometimes just doesn't really agree with the model. And when the flood comes, the flood comes. So I think I'm hearing you correctly though, is again, the further you go that direction, if you can, the further away from the floodplain you get.
Right. And to kind of build off that point, this essentially is a worst case analysis. With this home being so far south, it's within the flood fringe. It's getting closer to the floodway. It's outside of the floodway, so we do not have that as an issue. But in terms of what we're seeking with the floodplain variance, realistically, if this home is built anywhere on the southern side of Woodsidge Fork, there isn't really a spot to build the home as desired outside of that 50-foot floodplain setback. So if the home were to be moved, repositioned, we're still running into the same question that we have right now as to whether or not there would be a variance granted for that 50-foot floodplain setback. If the home is moved further north, you're absolutely correct. There's less of an impact. There are ways that you can look at rediverting drainage around the site. That will all be addressed with the improvement plans, but just in terms of what this variance is seeking to be able to make it into the next stages. The real question here is, can this home be built on the south side of Woodson Fork or not? We can certainly get into areas of fine tuning about the home placement, culvert size and culvert orientation, drainage ditches around the site to handle the waterway that runs along the southern side of the homes. But right now we are just seeking clarification and approval about that floodplain setback and the variance that we're requesting with it. Once we get past that, we can certainly be looking at other options.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Bromeyer has his hand raised. Ms. Keefe.
Yes, this is Linda Bromeyer. I had a question for Mr. Keister. Could he repeat the numbers of the amount of dirt above and below the floodplain out of that 12,000 cubic yards?
If Mr. Keister would like to answer, he's more than welcome.
So the number that was stated earlier by Ms. Bromeyer was 12,000. So that is the full amount of dirt that would be from essentially existing grade to top of proposed grade. When you're looking at the plane of the 100-year floodplain, between that plane and the existing grade, my calculations show approximately 500 cubic yards.
I thought you said earlier 5,400 cubic yards. And is that
Mrs. Bromeyer, you're going to need to direct questions to us. We're not.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm not understanding what Mr. Keister is saying.
Okay.
Is he talking about the amount of dirt that is above the floor level of the house above, or is he talking about the amount of dirt that is sitting down below in the flood area? Below the base flood elevation. And then repeat the number, please. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Yeah, what we'll do, Mrs. Bromeyer, is we'll ask Mr. Keister if he'd like to respond to that, and then we'll we'll go from there. Any other questions you have?
Yes, I do. I mean, they're promising that we'll look at all this again. If you just vote yes now, we'll look at all this later. But, it seems to me that the board was ready to go ahead and grant this variance until we all showed up and brought to your attention all these flooding problems. And it makes me very, very nervous that we would proceed. It seems to me it would be better to deny this variance and have the petitioner submit a different variance request where he's got the different setbacks and he's got the house closer to the road. And that would relieve a lot of our fears from the neighbors about flooding. That's all. Thank you.
Understood, Mrs. Bromeyer. Absolutely. That being said, Mr. Keister, do you want to address those values again? By all means, you can.
Yes. So in terms of the volume of the floodplain that is being displaced, so we're looking at the volume between the plane of the 100-year high water and the existing grade. My calculations show that is approximately 500 cubic yards. If I stated 4,500 or 5,400, I believe that was in error, but that is not what I have calculated. The 12,000 that was mentioned, that is in terms of the total fill between existing grade and what the proposed grades will be. That is outside of any floodplain volume calculation. That's just a volume takeoff for the construction of the home.
Which would be needed regardless, is what you're saying. Is that what you're saying?
Whether or not this was in or outside of floodplain.
Yeah.
But I think the question or the point is, that's still dirt. That will be there now and be there if the build happens. Versus today, there's nothing there, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think the question, the point of it's still 12,000.
Understood. And,
yeah. Okay.
And again, I
got it. Thank you.
May I address the board?
Yes, please proceed, Mrs.
Okay,
Bromeyer.
So out of 12,000 cubic yards of dirt being brought in, Mr. Keister is saying that the amount of dirt sitting at the bottom of the pile is only going to be 500 cubic yards. What about the driveway? And so he's saying the pile is going to be bigger on the top than on the bottom. There's going to be, if you take 12,000 minus 500, that's 11,500 cubic yards of dirt higher up and only 500 down at the bottom of the pile. That doesn't make sense.
Anything else, Mrs. Bromeyer?
No, that's all. I'm just trying to
Thank you.
understand. I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer.
No, understood. I think, just to state, we're all trying to understand this. We're all working through it. So, you said anything else? Any other questions you have before we move on, Mrs. Bromeyer?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
That is correct. So with this home, a walkout basement is desired. The lowest opening in this home will be the basement, which will be elevated 2 feet above the base floodplain elevation. In addition, there will be the grading for the driveway, and there will be the grading to get the adjacent grades on the other sides of the home up to the finished floor, which will then be closer to 11 feet above the base floodplain elevation. So that is where the difference in those numbers is. There's a certain amount that's below the base floodplain elevation, and then there's a substantial amount above the base floodplain elevation due to the area of the home and the elevations that are being shown.
Okay, thanks. May I address the board?
Yes, go ahead, Mrs.
Okay,
Bromeyer.
I would just ask your engineer, I think they need some kind of a section and have your engineers look at those numbers and verify them, because the driveway is extremely long and that seems like a lot of dirt needs to be brought in there. And just somebody sometime in the next, few days or weeks, whatever, please double check all that. And maybe Mr. Keister needs to provide the right kind of drawings to demonstrate that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for any petitioners? Yeah. Seeing none. Ms. Keefe, any other speakers cards?
Mr. Chair, I have no more speakers cards.
Good. Please state your name, address, relationship to this property, and we'll get you sworn in.
It's Bob Beisch, 3477 Whitsett Fork Road. And what else is it?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a neighbor, I imagine. We'll get you,
Yeah.
get you sworn in.
Live in the hood.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So I just have, so our family's been out in that valley since 1970, actually 1965, but I was too young then to go out by myself and all that. But just listening to this, and I've been to the last couple ones, it's a personal thing, but my question is, and I don't want to sound arrogant by any stretch, but with the neighbors that have all spoke the 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years in that valley, and us over 50, 60 years, and I feel all this hearsay and these analysts and all these hypothetical things, and I'm not being a smart when I say this, but if it all fails, all this stuff fails, does Wildwood pick up the tab for all these homes that have been there and gets ruined in that? Is that how that works? Because that's my concern, because the neighbors that I've known for so many years, if Lulu and Tracy if they get, I don't know, that hurts. It hurts. And I have nothing against this. I've never met this guy. But I have nothing against him. And I'm just speaking for the neighbors that have been there for so many years, that all this hypothetical evaluations of this and this and that. And then if this all blows up, I mean, is it all just what happens? Or maybe you don't know either. I don't, but is Wildwood responsible for that? That's no comment. I mean, you don't need to comment on it, but that's my concern. It's these people have been for so many years and there's a lot of things being thrown around in this room and have been. And it's, as a neighbor, it's a bunch of great people. That's all. Okay.
Understood.
Yeah.
Any other
Chair,
speakers, cards, Ms. Keefe? Okay. Would anybody like to hear an oral presentation of the department's report on this matter? Any other final comments the department would like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the board, the department, in preparing its final report for tonight's discussion, did provide a summary. And that summary can be, I think, even made shorter by just identifying that the department expressed concerns relative to the board designing by committee, meaning that we've heard a lot of alternatives, a lot of suggestions, a lot of additional things that might come. And certainly that's all part of this process. But before you tonight are two questions relative to the setback to the floodplain and the development of the floodplain. And so from that perspective, if you feel that the information that you've been provided has merits, then certainly, as the summary states, another application can be submitted. But I'm cautioning you to basically make conditions that design the site and the structures and improvements on it without having information before you. And so tonight, again, the department believes through the work of the city's engineer, an independent engineer that has been engaged by the city, and petitioner's engineer, that a no-rise certification has been provided. And from the perspective of our codes, that no-rise certification is a key element in supporting the development in the floodplain. And as has been mentioned, under the conservative approach of the city, the entirety of the site is within the floodplain, and therefore the 50-foot setback from the edge of floodplain would come into play relative to any project improvement or development on the property. But again, if you've heard things that you believe are appropriate and need to be addressed, let's not design by committee. Let's move forward with the request before us. And if there's a better approach, that better approach can be done through another application. If there are any questions regarding the summary that's been provided, the department would be glad to address them at this time.
I do, Mr. Vunich. Yeah, I don't think your words of caution about designing by committee are well said. I don't think we want to design by committee. But one of the things that this board has to decide and discern is there truly a hardship here? We're trying to get our arms wrapped around that hardship. And I think part of that hardship is, can the lot be used for its intended purpose, or for a home dwelling? And so part of what I think helps us sort through this is having a sense of, are there other options? We're not trying to design an option. We're just trying to get our arms wrapped around that, because if literally this is the only place, and we've been somewhat told this is the only place where a building could happen, I think that does influence our thinking a bit. But if the answer is, well, maybe you could go on the north side, but that's really a problem up there, we wouldn't want to do that. Wissett's Fork, I get that. But if there is an alternative, and it almost seems like maybe there would be an alternative, but it would also require a variance probably. I just want to make sure I understand that. Is the city saying, yeah, there's probably alternatives, but they also would require variances?
Board Member Springer, I believe that be the case, in that there are alternatives, but all of the alternatives will probably lead back to the Board of Adjustment.
Mhm.
And trying to determine the best of those alternatives by hearing testimony from neighbors, from experts for the petitioner, the experts for the city. There's too many risks associated with this particular property and its proximity to Hamilton Creek, Carr Creek, and the Merrimack River. Did not do it with a set of engineered plans.
Sure.
The support of the engineering community, both here, the city of Wildwood, independent engineer that we use in instances like this, and petitioner's engineers. So the caution isn't that you can't make a decision. It's a caution that you make the decision based upon best available information that reflects the approach the board feels is most reasonable based upon the testimony received through the series of discussions.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for the department?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other final comments from the board? At this time, we will close the proceeding for a vote. May I have a motion to approve, a motion to deny, or a motion to approve with conditions?
Well, based on the fact that I think there are alternatives that are maybe compelling and should be looked at. I think on this particular request, this one, I am going to make a motion to deny it.
Okay. Motion denied. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second to that motion to deny. Mr. Morris, how do you vote?
Deny.
Mr. Lee, how do you vote?
No, I will not deny this.
Mr. Sprunger?
Deny.
Mr. Lux?
Deny.
And I vote to deny as well. Your variance is denied as stated at this point. Anything else we need to add on this? We'll move on to the next motion.
No, sir,
Or
we
back-
have a second case, so. just
Yep,
wanted to
next.
remind you.
Yep. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move right along to the next variance.
The next item on the board's agenda is BA 16-24, Diana Meckler and Adam Shosteen, 1365 Nickel Court, Baldwin, Missouri, 63011. A request for an exception to the requirements relating to final zoning certification for the purpose of allowing the temporary use of a portion of this commercial building, Lucky Dog Central, to occur upon the property situated at 16917 Manchester Road, locator number 24V540163, which would thereby allow the operation of a commercial kitchen under a specific and defined timeline while other reviews are completed by the city. This request is contrary to the requirements of Chapter 415.190 C8 Plan Commercial District Regulations and Chapter 415.540 Administration, Enforcement, and Permits Regulations, Section C5 of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance. This particular property is located in Ward 8. And again, before Ms. Keefe begins her slide presentation, the department would like to introduce into the record Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request, and all contents contained therein, including the department's report with recommendation, and then finally any testimony or evidence that are provided as part of tonight's hearing. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Our second request this evening concerns a subject site that is located in the Wildwood Town Center within the historic Grover community and along Wildwood's historic Route 66 corridor in a commercial area of it. The site is zoned amended C8 Planned Commercial District and is governed by amended ordinance number 2589, which authorizes professional and medical dental offices, stores and shops for retail purposes, and a coffee shop and cafe in this location. The petitioners this evening are planning, well, not this evening, but shortly, are planning to open a dog cafe and coffee shop with retail store at this location and have received an occupancy permit for such. This business will be located in a single family, what was a single family dwelling originally constructed in 1956 and converted to these purposes. This building has an access driveway, parking lot area, and fenced lawn space associated with it. Here is the site plan. The request this evening is for another local business in Wildwood to use the building's commercial kitchen on a temporary basis while the site governing ordinance is amended to allow for a commercial kitchen component in this location. This process typically takes up to 90 days to complete, and an application has been submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission for this request and will be reviewed in August. The city's economic development director and city administrator, who is the same person, is supportive of the request. This is the front of the building looking north. This is looking southwest on Old Manchester Road or historic Route 66. This is looking south across the street from the subject property. And this is looking east on Manchester Road. And this is looking northeast. There is a residential property next door in this location to the east. This is looking northwest in the back rear fenced in area. And this is looking north in that same location. The department has received one comment in opposition of the request from the neighbor next door to it, which the board has before you. Thus concludes my presentation this evening. At this time, the department is available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keefe. Any initial questions for the department? Mhm. At this time, will the petitioner please come forward, state his or her name, address, relationship to the property, and then we'll swear you in.
Mr. Chair, our petitioners are online, so let me promote them.
Okay.
And video. Hi, can everybody, oh, there we are. Okay. Can everybody hear us?
We can. If you could please state your name, we'll swear you in separately. If you can, just state your name, relationship to the property, address, and then we'll swear you in.
All right. So Adam Schomstein and co-owner.
Diana Meckler, co-owner as well. I think we have to do our address too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you could please state your address.
Oh, 16917 Manchester Road.
Okay.
Our house address.
Oh, 1365 Nike Court.
And then the relationship to this property?
Co-owner.
Okay. I'm sorry you said that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
If you could please state the nature of the variance and the hardship it poses.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Miss Becky, who makes wonderful salsa and chips, currently travels from Wildwood to Fenton to use a kitchen so that she can make her items. She has to get up, I think it's like 4 or 5 in the morning in order to be there on time. And so Miss Becky is very active in the business community. She makes wonderful food, and we have plenty of space in our kitchen that we're happy to lend her so she doesn't have to make that commute. This would enable her to have more time to spend making making her food, improving her business. And we have plenty of space in our kitchen for her. And our kitchen has been inspected and approved by the health department. And so we would be happy to have somebody as nice as her, and plus being within close proximity of her chips and salsa would be a real pleasure.
Yes. Anything else you'd like to add? I think that's well stated. Any questions for the applicant, petitioner? Seeing none. Anything else you'd like to add? Either one of you?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you much. Any speakers in the audience that may want to speak in favor or opposition to this request? I think we had one speaker.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have Miss Becky.
Okay,
Here with us.
Miss Becky's here. Absolutely. Come on up. Oh. If you could please state your name, address, relationship to this property or this petition, and we'll get you sworn in.
Rebecca Boomerschlegel, 1304 Homestead Heights, 63005. And I am a small business owner here in Wildwood, hoping to use the kitchen from Lucky Dog Central to make my wonderful chips and salsa.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Miss Becky.
Great. I just wanted to introduce myself. I've lived here in Wildwood for about 8.5 years. Just celebrated our 4th summer anniversary with the small business here in Wildwood, where I make freshly made fire roasted salsa and chips to sell at the farmers markets and local businesses. Diana and Adam are offering me an opportunity. I currently make my products in a commercial kitchen in Fenton. And yes, I do get up at 3:30 in the morning to make sure that I'm there between 4:30 and 5 o'clock on the weeks that I do work the farmer's market. It would be really nice to be closer to home. I live about 7 minutes away from here. And I think it would be a great opportunity, and I would really appreciate the opportunity. Essentially, for my products, it would be the use of their counter, electricity, and a plug for my blender so that I can make my product. So that's it.
Anything else?
Any questions?
Any questions for Miss Becky?
So just to confirm, making no modifications, no construction, no permanent or even beyond the 90-day temporary changes, just as simple as you just said it, right?
Correct. I'm permitted through the health department. I have a food establishment permit that is with my other commissary through the end of July, so time is of the essence. I've applied for a food establishment permit to be able to use at Lucky Dog Central. All of my permits I have in place do not transfer per the health department. So I'm having to reapply for everything and redirect it to a new location.
Speaking of reapplying, Ms. Becky, in the departments, is 90 days enough? Is that what is that giving you enough time? Is that what I saw?
That was the next question, was the duration is
The duration.
not to exceed 90 days. Is that enough?
As
time?
far as to wait before I would be able to utilize the kitchen or,
No, I believe that the variance would be granted for the duration of 90 days to allow you to use the kitchen for 90 days.
Right. That would be helpful.
Are you needing more? Is that enough time? Do you have plans after that?
Yeah,
I guess what we're
I
asking
would
is just-
eventually like for it to become permanent. So
Okay.
the initial step would be to apply for a temporary
Gotcha.
variance until
Maybe-
we could apply for something that was permanent.
Maybe the department, when you're up, Director Gaines, you can explain the differences, but I think that's.
Any other questions I can help you with? Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becky.
Mr. Chair, we also have a speaker's card from Marilee Douster.
Start with his last name. Douster. If you could.
I'm here,
Ms.
Douster. I live at 16910 Near Acres Drive, which is the property behind the bakery.
Get you sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I guess I just have more questions. When the couple that purchased the property built, it was in the time of, I shouldn't say built, bought. It was in the time of COVID. So all the meetings happened via Zoom. And I'm not real technology person at that time. And I listened to them and tried to speak, but was not able. So I just thought, okay, I'm not missing my opportunity tonight to ask questions. And that's what I guess I'm really doing. I'm wondering how this is going to affect me and my property. Not that they're going to do anything to it, but I know I guess I'm concerned what all could go in with them. If that makes sense. Could it be more than just the salsa place? What other things by changing the zoning could happen in their property? I'm going to look at you. Mr.
Yep,
Boone.
I think when. Yep, yeah, no, continue with the questions, and then I think what we'll have is the department will make some final comments, and I imagine Director Vunich is taking notes, and we'll get those answers for you.
Just going to make this statement too. When they first petitioned to purchase the property and put their lucky dog in it, there was a lady on the committee who's not here, and I don't remember her name, but she inquired about barking. And I thought, oh, that's a good thing for me. I don't want it to turn into a Vinrock. And I don't know if any of you were old enough to know Vinrock Kennels, which was on Rogers, sort of the other side of Manchester Road. And I would definitely not like to have that in my backyard. So that's why I'm curious as to what can happen.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Any other speakers online or in the audience that would like to speak in favor or opposition to the request?
Mr. Chair, I have no more speakers cards and I do have one individual online. I do not see a raised hand. And I still do not see a raised hand.
Any,
Oh, sorry. I didn't know if we were supposed to chime in. I apologize. No, nothing else is going to be added. It's just going to be Miss Becky making her salsa.
And then just to chime into that, so we're not a kennel and our hours are going to be until probably, we're not quite sure yet, but it's not going to be late at all. So it's definitely not going to be something you're going to hear all night long. At most, I think.
Yeah, but that doesn't even affect Miss Becky's
Well, just to answer.
making salsa.
I think, yeah, I think for our purposes,
Yeah.
Ms. Becky, we'll limit to her kind of her interaction with the kitchen,
Yeah.
kind of those
So
hours.
it would only be based off of the loudness of her car, and should she choose to modify it so it's one of those like zoom 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 cars, But I don't think she has that.
Noted. Anything else you'd like to add? Okay, thank you. Any other final questions or comments for the petitioner or any of the speakers? Sure. If you could, please. That's that's okay, Ms. Doster. If you could just come to the microphone and
If they would leave their business and that business would go for sale for something else, does this variance allow it to become, I don't know, something that would not be happy by us on our street? And I know that's an if, but.
Director Bunich is going to, when
Okay.
when he comes up, we will absolutely address, we'll talk about the overall precedents that these variances set and understood. Any other questions, or comments from the board? Okay. Any other final comments the department would like to make?
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the board, first and foremost, the department is recommending approval of the variance because of its temporary nature. The 90-day window was specifically selected because there is a second step in this process. The property will be posted for a meeting before the Planning and Zoning Commission, where much more detail will be provided relative to the commercial kitchen aspect. Ms. Becky Salsa and the role in that commercial kitchen and how protections will be put in place for surrounding property owners, particularly the residential property to the east and then the residential properties to the north. So from the perspective of this particular variance, it is specific to Ms. Becky's Salsa, because everything that is in the file and everything that's been discussed in the department's recommendation report is for that. So no one else can come in this 90-day window and benefit from the variance based upon the description in the advertisement and the information and recommendation in the report. As this moves forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, the department, if it is a favorable action, recommendation to the commission and then the commission to the board, city council, we will provide those protections we believe appropriate for a property of this size, a building of this nature, and the existing primary uses that were intended originally when the C8 district was amended to accommodate Lucky Dog Central. So the intent isn't to expand this to a true commercial kitchen. The intent from the department's perspective, and I can only speak for the department, is to ensure that Ms. Becky Salsa can thrive here and probably not much else. So again, we are recommending approval of this 90-day window to address our process, which takes a little less than 90 days.
Fair enough. I think that gives some good clarity there.
So did you say that it's just for Miss Becky?
This particular variance is, and as we move forward to the other components with the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, the intent will be to describe something that's very similar to Miss Becky, but not by name.
Okay.
And that would be done under a separate process. This is not part of tonight's grant. Tonight is specific to Miss Becky for a period of up to 90 days. That's it. Right.
That's it. And if the City Council should ultimately deny the request, the 90-day window will be enforced and we'll ask Miss Becky to find commercial kitchen quarters elsewhere besides this location.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the department?
Thank you.
Okay. Would anybody like to hear an oral presentation of the department's report? See. Any final comments from the board? Seeing none. Sorry, go ahead. At this time, we will close the proceeding for a vote. May I have a motion to approve, a motion to deny, or a motion to approve with conditions?
I will make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Quick question, if I could, on that. Does that include the 90-day stipulation with a motion to approve, or does that need to be stated?
I would defer to the maker of the motion.
Did you want to amend your, or do you want to amend your motion?
I don't think I have to amend it
Mr.
because the
Lee.
recommendation is no greater than 9 days. To the recommendations by staff.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
All right,
So
in that case, I will second.
we have a motion and a second to approve with the conditions based upon the recommendations of the staff being no greater than 90 days. Do we, sorry, let me go to Mr. Sprunger. How do you vote? Approve. Mr. Lux?
Approve.
Mr. Morris?
Approve.
Mr. Lee?
Approve.
And I approve as well. Congratulations. Your variance is approved. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We do have one last item on tonight's agenda, and that is to approve the minutes of the board's June 20th, 2024 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as stated?
I'll motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Mr. Sprunger, how do you vote? Approve. Mr. Lux, how do you vote?
Approve.
Mr. Morris?
Approve.
Mr. Lee?
Approve.
And I approve as well. So the minutes from the June 20th meeting are approved.
Mr. Chair, if I could have the liberty, a shout out to Ms. Keefe who prepared the minutes. They were quite long and detailed, so thank you.
They're heavy, so yes, there are many pages. Thank you very much, as always, to the staff. So any other business for tonight? Consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.